Well, let's read it together. We're in Luke chapter 6, 46 through 49. It says, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? As for everyone who comes to me and hears my words and puts them into practice, I will show you what they are like. They are like a man building a house who dug down deep and laid the foundation on rock. When the flood came, the torrent struck that house, but could not shake it because it was well built. But the one who hears my words and does not put them into practice is like a man who built his house on the ground with no foundation. The moment the torrent struck that house, it collapsed and its destruction was complete." So, in any time you're reading Scripture, you need to find the context of what's going on. And so we want to find who this audience is. And if we do that, we have to go all the way back to verse 17, where we see that Luke starts to set the scene of this long passage. He says he went down with them, and he stood on a level place. A large crowd of disciples, which is key, was there, and a great number of people from all over Judea, Jerusalem, and from the coastal region around Tyre and Sidon. So we've got a mix of people, both his disciples, people that have come and decided to follow him, and then a group of people that have come to kind of check it out and preview what's going on, see what this Jesus is all about. And the first thing he starts off with is asking him this very interesting question, and it's the big question this whole passage centers around. And that question is, why do you call me Lord, Lord? Now the Greek word for Lord here is kurios. And kurios is used a lot in the New Testament. It's not just pertaining to Jesus. This just means maybe a lord of a manor, like you think, Downton Abbey type style. This could be somebody who's in charge of a group of people, is maybe a master, as some translations have it that way, a master of employees or slaves in that day. And so this is somebody that you would call this title to that they would earn. Now, before I worked here at this church, I worked at Target for several years, and I had a bunch of direct reports, a bunch of people that reported to me that I was responsible for making sure they were getting their work done and all these things. And one of my favorite, because she was just a great employee, was named Carmen. And Carmen was just fantastic. She's one of those people that was just self-motivated. She was getting stuff done. She, did all her work. She got it done early. She was one of the person that you never really had to check in on. You just knew that Carmen was going to handle it, right? And the greatest thing, now what I loved about Carmen is she got everything done. I didn't have to, tell her what to do all the time. But one of the greatest things is that she never called me Jared. She only called me boss. It made me feel so cool. Like I would walk in the back room, "Hey boss, what's up boss? Hey boss, I got a question. Boss, I got this." And it was just this amazing lift to my ego, if nothing else, right? And so just to hear her, "Hey boss." And the great thing was Carmen was not somebody who was a kid. Carmen was a grandmother. I think actually now she's even a great grandmother. I mean, she lived more life than I have. She's experienced in every way. She'd been at Target much longer than I had. She'd actually done my job prior to working at this store, but she transferred our store and took a cut in pay and stepped down and just did a specific job. And yet she knew all my ins and outs of my job. So she knew everything that I was supposed to be doing, and she probably could do it way better than me. But the fact that just in the structure of things, I was in charge of what she was getting done, in charge of her. And so she would call me boss. And so I was just like, oh man, this is a great nickname. I started to have people at home call me boss, but it didn't really catch on, right? And then one day I put in my 2 weeks notice, and I ended up, because I was able to come on full-time here at church, and I remember I went back the next day maybe, or next 2 days, to go buy something at Target, and I walked by Carmen, and she's like, "Hey, good to see you, Jared." And it was this shock to me, because it was like I got demoted, and I had, in a way, because I was no longer boss. See, Carmen knew, even though she knew more than I did, she knew everything my job entailed. She could do it better than me. She had more life experience. She elevated me to this point of being boss, because I was in charge of her. I was responsible for her work and everything she did. And so she put me in this place. Now, this is what Jesus is asking. Maybe a better equivalent for us is, you call me boss, but you don't do what I do or do what I say. Why is it you call me boss? And so that's the question. Now, Jesus said, you call me Lord, Lord, but you don't do what I say. Now, he had no issue with people calling him Lord. In John chapter 13, verse 13, it actually is the Last Supper. He says, "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am." And so Jesus acknowledged he is Lord and teacher, and there's no question about that. His question was, you call me Lord, but you don't do what I say. So why do you call me Lord, Lord? And if you think about it, this really is a divisive question, because it lines up with two people. There's people that you say, that he says, you call me Lord, Lord, and you should, but you don't do what I say. See, these people chose to put that title on him. Remember the group of people that were there, the people that were his disciples, they were following him around, learning from his teaching, and they would call him Lord. And when they did that, they would say, Master. And if you're responding to somebody's master, you're the boss, but you don't do what they say, are you really saying they're the boss? Maybe in word, but not in action. And so he says, he asks this question, you call me Lord, Lord, but you don't do what I say. Automatically, he divides the crowd into two people, or two groups. Those who call him Lord and do what he says, and those that call him Lord but don't do what he says. And he divides this action. There's no third camp. There's not a middle ground. It's not a Venn diagram where these things overlap. They're two separate categories. And Jesus does this a lot. In Matthew chapter 7 and verse 13, 14, he talks about there's two gates. There's a narrow gate and a narrow road, and those lead to life, to life, and there's a road that's wide that leads to destruction. There's no third road. Or in verse 18 of Matthew chapter 7, it says there's a good tree, and a good tree cannot bear bad fruit. You can tell what kind of tree it is by what kind of fruit it is. It's either a good tree that bears good fruit or a bad tree that bears bad fruit. And again, he's divisive, and there's two groups. There's no third option. In Matthew 25, it says, when the Son comes in all his glory and when his angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates his sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right hand and the goats on his left. So again, Jesus over and over telling us there are two ways you're going to go. It's either you're going to be a sheep or a goat or a good tree, a bad tree, one of these, or you're going to call me Lord and do what I say, or you're going to call me Lord and not do what I say. And so there are only two options that he gives us here. Now, let's read 46 and 49 again. I'm going to just keep reading it. It says, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? As for everyone who comes to me and hears my words and puts them into practice, I will show you what they are like. They are like a man building a house who dug down deep and laid the foundation on a rock. When a flood came, a torrent struck, and the house could not shake it. Because it was well built. Well, the one who hears my words and does not put them into practice is like a man who built a house on the ground without foundation. The moment the torrent struck that house, it was collapsed, and the destruction was complete. So he gives two options. He divides them into two camps, right? A strong foundation or no foundation. Now, a lot of us hear this, or we know this parable, even if we haven't grown up in church. This is something that's kind of been ingrained in American culture. You want to have a strong foundation because that's going to be strong. And so it's kind of this idea that we all understand. We're on the same page of yes, we need to build our foundation on something solid. The thing is, we need to put Jesus' words into practice to have that foundation. Now, a lot of times people that I talk to don't like this idea. They don't like this idea. It's kind of confrontational. We want there so badly to be a third option, right? Because we want, I believe, and maybe you'll hear people say this, I think Jesus was a really good guy and he had some good teaching, or maybe some people say, I want to hear it all and I want to really figure out what I want to believe. So I'm going to put off calling Jesus Lord or admitting that he's the Son of God. I'm going to figure that out later. And they think they can get this third option by, I'll make that decision to call him Lord later. But even when people do that, or when they say, well, I think Jesus was a prophet of God, but he wasn't the Son of God, they think that they're developing this third option. But in reality, they're putting themselves in the camp of not calling him or not putting him as Lord in their life. Jesus doesn't give us this third option. As much as we would like him to, he only gives us the two options: the strong foundation of doing what he says, or the weak foundation that falls apart of calling him Lord but not obeying his teaching. And so there's only two options. They're either living or dying. There's no third direction. Now, this parable is one that we've all heard and we've put into practice. Now, there are some things, as we know this is something that we've heard before and we've developed. And if you've grown up in church, or maybe you know this idea of there being a foundation to build on. And so it's easy to overlook a couple of interesting things that Jesus brings up. The first one is that everyone has a house. Everyone has a house. Now the house, right, both groups of people, either the foundation or the no foundation, they build their house, they build their system of beliefs, but it's what they build them on that's the difference. See, we all have a house. We all have something that we believe. Even people that are outside of the church, everybody has some sort of an idea of what God is. Even an atheist, and I follow this guy on Instagram. I want to show you this idea. He has this idea, this video that I wanted to share with you of just what it is for an atheist sometimes.
Christian, why do you believe in all that weird supernatural stuff?
I've got my reasons. Why do you believe what you believe?
I'm an atheist. I don't have any beliefs to defend.
Really? Well, what about the universe? Where do you believe that came from?
I don't know. From nowhere, I guess.
Okay, what about life? Do you think it has any ultimate purpose?
No, we're just here by accident.
How about love, right and wrong? Do they exist?
No, they're all just concepts we've invented. Like I said, I don't have any beliefs to defend.
Really? I just heard quite a few beliefs from you, that the universe came from nowhere, that there's no ultimate purpose to life, and that our fundamental beliefs in love and justice are just illusions. Most atheists I meet have just as many beliefs as Christians about the nature of reality. They're just different ones. The question is, whose story makes best sense of the life we both share?
So even those people that are outside the church or claim no belief in God, that's still a belief about God. If you believe there is no God, you still have an opinion of where God's existence. And so all of us have an idea and have these belief systems that we build our life on, and we do these things. Everyone has a house. Everyone has a house. No matter what they say they believe, that's even a belief in that. So as we look at these things, we have to ask, what is it that we're going to build our foundation on? Or what are we going to build our house, our center of beliefs? Now, a lot of times also, as Westerners, we have this idea of faith as more of an idea or a culmination of thoughts, the things that we believe. We believe our faith is, well, my faith is in this thing. We think about this, or we have a certain way that we think, and we have a culmination of knowledge that we call our faith. The Hebrew people, and that's Jesus' audience who he's speaking to here, as we learned in verse 17, don't just think about the group of thoughts that you have, but instead it's the way that you live is your faith. Christy McLeland in her book, in one of her books says this: we, talking about Western Christians, are more of a Greco-Roman than Hebraic. As a culture, we tend to be more like Aristotle or Socrates or Plato than we are Jesus, Peter, or Paul, and that we are more philosophical. Faith is what we think rather than what we do. Faith is a set of beliefs that we cognitively know, more of a lifestyle and more than a lifestyle that we walk out, as it is for the Jews. So for us, it's an idea. Faith lives up here and lives in our brain to what we believe. And yet for Jesus' Jewish audience, it was more how we live out the things that we believe. That is what our faith is. Now we would say it that way, or Christy McLeland said it that way. James, in the book of James, in chapter 2, verse 14, says it this way. He says, "What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such a faith save them? Suppose a brother or sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to him, "Go in peace, keep warm, be well fed," but does nothing about their physical need, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it's not accompanied by action, is dead. But someone will say, "You have faith, I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by what I do." So James has this idea that no, it's not just about believing a certain way, not about just thinking a certain way, but about living that out, demonstrating those thoughts into action. And Paul, even when he's writing, he's in 1 Timothy, he gives this idea of what a deacon should be. Now, the word deacon in Greek is diakonos, and it means basically it can be translated servant. And so it's a person that is serving. And he says this about a person that is serving in 3:14. He says, "Those who have served well gain an excellent understanding and great assurance in their faith in Christ Jesus." It's through that serving God and serving other people, that people gain a full understanding of who Christ is. So it's not just about having a certain set of thoughts. The house that we build on the foundation needs to be more than just what we think, but it's what we do, how we live it out to our neighbors, how we live it out to our friends, how we live it out in serving one another. Everyone has a set of beliefs that they live by, and we can tell those beliefs in the actions that they do. Now, another one, and it's kind of on the way here, I was thinking about it as I was driving, how can I demonstrate versus saying what we believe versus believing what we do or doing what we believe? And I was thinking on the way here, I've got a girl who's getting her license pretty soon, right? And you ever become hyper aware of your driving, it's when you have a person with a permit in the car. And as she got her permit, what they're requiring now, and this is really cool, is they have to watch a video before you can get your permit about the dangers of texting and driving. And it's a video, and as I watch it, I'm like, absolutely, that is absolutely true. Texting and driving is a horrible thing because it's so dangerous. It takes your attention off the road. You're so distracted, right? But then, and so that's what I believe in my head. Those are my thoughts. But then when I'm driving and that text comes through and I dig out my phone because it might be something important, right? At that point, what's really my belief? Is my belief that texting is always dangerous and horrible? Or is it, well, sometimes it's okay? What's my belief? I can say all day long, texting is horrible, and while you're driving, you should never do it. But the moment that phone comes out of my pocket and I glance down to check it, what's my real belief? In the same way, we can say that we follow Christ, but if our actions don't match up, then do we really follow Christ? Now, the other thing, the certain thing that Jesus includes in his parable there, is that the storm is coming. Everybody has a house. Everybody has a system of beliefs that they've built. And we know that a storm is coming. There's something that is coming that will shake your faith, will blow up against it, will test it. Sometimes it's an outside force. Maybe it's a sickness or the loss of a loved one or pain in somebody else that you see hurt or destruction, and it starts to shake your faith. It could be the loss of a thing or a spouse or just your misunderstanding of who God is. Sometimes it can be inside questioning, things that are coming in your own head. Some of the biggest times I've ever seen for me to question my faith is when I'm preparing for a sermon. And I'm writing these things down and I start thinking, wait, do I really believe this? And I have to step back and go, wait a minute, of course you do. Look at all the proofs in your life. Look at these things. Yes, you believe them. And it happens more often than I want to admit. I'm getting ready to come up here and deliver the message. I'm like, wait, I'm going to go say these things. And do I really believe them? Do I really? Okay, yes it is. And so even in our own head, sometimes that storm develops there. Now, these are natural things. The storm comes, whether an outside force, sickness, illness, whatever it may be, or you're inside, you're questioning your own faith, your reassurance. Those things happen. But it's because of those things, and they happen to all of us. And that's exactly why Paul writes to the Thessalonians in chapter 5, verse 11, he says, of 1 Thessalonians, he says, therefore, encourage one another and build each other up, just as you are doing. Because Paul understood that we will be skeptical sometimes in our faith, that our faith will be rocked. That's why there's so many verses in the New Testament about one another. Carry one another's burdens. Love one another. Spur one another onto love and good deeds. Because of these things, we know we need that encouragement, because sometimes our faith will have that storm blowing up against it. I firmly believe that is why Jesus gave us communion also, is because we are people that forget easily. And so he wanted us to give us something tactile, something bread and juice to remember each time we get together what he did for us. And so he gives us bread and juice to remind us, you have faith. I have done this for you. And so we can have faith in what he has done. So we know everyone has a house, a system of beliefs, a set of beliefs, and a storm is coming. So the question is, what will happen to your house when the storm comes? What will happen to your house when the storm hits? Will it stand on a foundation that is solid? Or will you figure out that you've built your beliefs on sand? Now, there's a few things that you can do. One of the greatest things I think you can do is have a plan. If you're prepared for the storm, and I'm talking in real life, if you know a storm is coming and you get the sandbags ready, you dig the trenches around, or you do make sure your drainage is working good, those things help you weather the storm. In the same way, with your faith, you can do the same thing. Prepare for that storm coming. One of the greatest things is just to make a resolution, to resolve to yourself that you are going to stay strong. One time we were at youth group, in my old youth group, there was this time that we were making kind of a dumb video, and it was just, hey, let's get together, and we were hanging out together, and let's film this thing. And we had one of these giant inflatable ballerina suits. I don't know if you've seen these, right? Where it's like a ballerina suit that blows up, and so it looks like a really overweight lady in a little tiny ballerina thing. And it was just fun. We were going to dance around, and I was going to edit it together and make a fun music video, just as a youth group having fun. Right? And so all these people, I've got all these kids, and I was like, okay, it's your turn. And I would kind of passive-aggressively bully these kids into doing this, right? Like, no, you can do it. Come on, it's your turn. Oh, no, you can't say no, everything. And I go and everybody's doing it. And eventually, it builds momentum, and all the kids are like, oh, I want to be next. I want to do that. And then there's Charlotte Engel. And Charlotte is just like, no. And Charlotte was the most soft-spoken. She was up for doing anything. She was not afraid to be in front of people. It was not a sense of fear, but she was just not going to do this. And I was like, okay, maybe I can just persuade her. Come on, Charlotte, everybody's doing it, and kind of giving her those things. And it was this moment where she was just absolutely stone-cold calm. No. Because in her mind, she'd made up ahead of time, there's no way that I'm going to do this. And she wasn't outright about it. She wasn't over the top, gregarious about it. She was just like, no. There's no explanation, no reason, but she'd already resolved ahead of time. This is not something I'm going to do. And I even asked her, I was like, there's no way that I can persuade you to do this, is there, Charlotte? No. Okay. And I just left her alone. In the same way, if we make up our mind ahead of time, Lord, I will not abandon my faith when things get hard. That can give us so much resolution when the storm hits, knowing that we have decided to weather that storm and stay with Christ can be an amazing thing. So we can choose to live the way of Jesus before that storm hits. Another practical thing we can do is build the habits of laying that foundation. Get into your word, into the Bible. Pick up one of those sheets. Start studying Luke. Look at other things. Study the Bible. Spend time in prayer. If we know God and we talk to him when the days are sunny, it's so much easier to hear his voice when it gets cloudy and the rain starts coming down. And so if we build those habits of time, if we surround ourselves with people that lift us up with fellowship, that build us up in Christ, we have somebody to turn to that can help carry that burden when the flood starts coming. We have people to help us dig those trenches, to make sure our foundation is strong. And so by simply doing that, having people around us to lift us up. Also, when we start to serve one another, when life is good, we build that habit of serving and continue to live the way of Jesus when the storm comes. If we get in the habit of coming and offering worship to God, not when we feel like it, but when we know we should, when we build that habit of worshiping God, of God giving our attention, our love, our praise to the Lord, when the storm hits, we have that built in already and we can come back easily. The biggest thing that we can do is fully hand over our life to Jesus and know when the storm hits our house, our actions, our faith is built on the foundation in Him. So let us all give the full idea, give ourselves fully to calling Him Lord, Lord, and absolutely meaning it by the actions that we do. Let's pray. God, thank you for this evening. Thank you for bringing us here. Through our aches and pains, through technical difficulties, through all this stuff, Lord. Lord, I pray that we can praise you with all that we are. We just pray this in your Son's name. Amen.